So, Impact Wrestling Under Siege is this Saturday. It's on Impact Plus. It's one of these special Impact Plus events. If you're not really familiar with Impact Wrestling, you haven't watched for a while, or you haven't watched since maybe the heyday of TNA Wrestling on Spike TV or something like that. Essentially, what Impact Wrestling does nowadays is they have 4 big pay-per-view events a year. Now, those 4 big events are the likes of Hard to Kill, Impact Rebellion, Slammiversary, and Bound for Glory. But they still have events pretty much every single month. Instead of having the 4 major events on pay-per-view, there are other events such as Impact Under Siege events on Impact Plus. And Impact Plus, if you're not familiar, is essentially Impact's version of the WWE Network. It's their own streaming service, so that's what Under Siege is going to be on Saturday nights. If you are a fan of Impact Wrestling and the content that we do when it comes to Impact Wrestling here on the channel, I know a lot of the guys here, a lot of you guys are loyal subscribers, people that watch the content here on the channel, really enjoy the Impact Wrestling content that we do. So this Saturday we will be doing an Impact Wrestling Under Siege watch along, and then afterwards we'll be doing a separate stream, doing an Impact Under Siege reaction stream. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Bottom right hand corner, click the notification bell. You'll be notified when we go live on Saturday night for both of the streams talking about the Impact Under Siege watch along and the Impact Under Siege reaction. Really excited to watch this event tomorrow. Really excited to... We're on the road to Slammiversary. That's what we are at the moment, aren't we? We're on the road to Slammiversary. And do I think we're going to see anything, major happen at this event? Maybe not. I think obviously the main event is really the match that everyone's really talking about as to what's going to happen in the future. In my opinion, and I know we've spoken about this quite a lot here on the channel over the course of the last couple of weeks or so. In my opinion, I think that the winner of the main event probably moves on to Against All Odds next month, which once again is an Impact Plus event. I think they probably move on to there and they face Kenny Omega there. But we're going to get into all that here in this prediction video. So let's get straight into the matches, because a surprising thing here actually is there's a lot of matches on this show. And I know that this technically could be considered a pay-per-view, so it's not that surprising. But there is, let me just count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 matches here on this card. So it's a lengthy card. I mean, WWE nowadays, even WWE, their pay-per-views, they can last about 3 hours or so, but they might be a 5 or 6 match card. So 9 matches in 6 hours. We're going to get probably some pretty quick matches here, which is certainly interesting to say the least. But let's get straight into the matches. Let's start off with determining the number 1 contenders for the Impact Tag Team Championships. Of course, you've got Ace Austin and Madman Fulton. You've got TJP and Petey Williams. You've got XXXL in there as well. Of course, that is being AC Romero. And you've also got Larry D in there too. And then you've also got, finally, you've got the tag team of Rohit, Raju and Shira involved in this one. So, I mean, to be fair, Impact Wrestling, of course, the tag team champions right now are Juice from New Japan Pro Wrestling. You've got David Finlay and Juice Robinson. They're going to be involved in a 6-man tag team match later on in this show. I think the Impact Tag Team division is pretty strong at the moment. Is it as strong as it has been previously? I still think they're maybe possibly struggling from the departure of Ethan Page and therefore breaking up the North. I think is maybe part of a problem that Impact Wrestling are slightly have when it comes to the tag team division right now. But look, you've got tag teams here that are very, very capable of maybe stepping up. As I mentioned, you've got Juice Robinson and David Finlay as the tag team champions. My only concern would be with the tag team division right now is, out of all of these tag teams here, realistically, who could be an Impact World Tag Team Champion? Really, I don't see. I mean, Rohit, Raju, and Shira possibly could be a tag team champions, I suppose. No disrespect to XXXL, I just don't see them being the tag team champions anytime soon. I think they're more of a comedic act. TJP and Pete Williams, are they even a tag team? That feels like a thrown together team anyway, 2 singles guys put together, which is never my preference when it comes to tag team wrestling anyway. Ace Austin and Madman Fulton, obviously I'm a huge fan of Ace Austin, and I could definitely see him and Madman Fulton being Impact Tag Team Champions. My thing with that would be, though, is that I want to see Ace Austin involved in the Impact World Championship scene. Obviously, he's been the X Division champion this year. He won the Super X Cup tournament. You could say putting the tag team titles on him at some point keeps him in the spotlight where he deserves to be. But again, I would prefer to see him way higher up the card. Obviously, July last year, he was the final guy eliminated at Slammiversary when it came to the Impact World Championship main event. He was eliminated by Eddie Edwards. Eddie Edwards became the Impact World Champion. I just don't know if I necessarily would want to see him in tag team wrestling. I think not that he's better than that or anything like that. I think even despite his young age, I think this guy needs to be featured higher up on the card in singles action. I think that's where he thrives, to be honest with you. So in terms of predicting an outcome in this one, I think Ace Austin and Madman Fulton win. If it's not them, I would probably see Rohit, Raju, and Shira, but I would probably go with Ace Austin and Madman Fulton. I think that lines up an interesting feud with Austin and Fulton and Finjuice for the Tag Team Championships. It looks like Finjuice are going to be holding on to the Impact World Tag Team Championships until at least Slammiversary. So they're going to be sticking around in Impact for a while, which goes to show that the working relationship between Impact Wrestling and New Japan right now is very strong, which is very exciting because I think everyone's excited to see the relationship between Impact Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling continue to blossom, because the more Impact Wrestling stars that can transfer over to New Japan, the better for the company. And also, selfishly, as a fan of Impact Wrestling, if we can get an Okada, a Naito, Tanahashi once he's recovered from his injury, or Ibushi, or all of these names, that's Jay White obviously coming over. If you get any of those names on an Impact Wrestling broadcast, that's really exciting, isn't it? It's incredibly exciting. So it goes to show that the relationship between Impact and New Japan is still relatively strong right now. So if I had to pick an outcome for this one, I think Madman Fulton and Ace Austin get the victory. Ace Austin gets the pinfall over, I would probably say Petey Williams or TJP, probably Petey Williams, and then that lines up Ace Austin and Madman Fulton to face Finjuice possibly next month at Against All Odds, which of course is the next Impact Plus event. Let's move on. Brian Myers versus Black Taurus. Of course, Black Taurus has got the Decay in their corner. When it comes to Brian Myers, and I don't really want to, be one of those people that toots my own horn or anything like that all the time, because it just, where does that get you? But when it comes to Brian Myers, when Brian Myers was released from WWE last year in April, he was part of the group of WWE superstars that were released, fired, furloughed, let go. Obviously, it wasn't just talent on screen. It was employees, producers, backstage agents, you name it. They were all let go by WWE at the time. Brian Myers, I said at the time, I want to see him come to Impact. I think Impact's the best place for him. Obviously, he had history in Impact Wrestling. He's a former Impact World Tag Team Champion. I believe was that with Trevor Lee, now Cameron Grimes? I think it was, wasn't it? As part of the GFW invasion angle with Jeff Jarrett. But I said at the time that I felt that Impact would be the best place for him, because people forget before Brian Myers went back to WWE in 2016, he was gradually getting over on the independent scene. People were treating him more than just an enhancement talent, just a job guy or anything like that. And ultimately, when he went back to WWE, wouldn't you know it? It just goes to show, if WWE's got this perception of you, that's it. That's your perception, and he can't change that. And that was the case with Brian Myers when he was there in WWE. So I was hoping that he would come to Impact, because I didn't want him to see him go to an AEW, get lost in the shuffle. I felt that possibly he could go to a Ring of Honor. I think he would succeed there too, because he's a pro wrestling fan and he's a pro wrestling historian, so he would succeed in somewhere like Ring of Honor too. But obviously he had history with Impact, and I think it suited him really well to come back to Impact Wrestling, and we've proven that. It's proven that. He's had some fantastic matches, some great feuds against like Tommy Dreamer, obviously Matt Cardona as well. And he's starting to establish himself once again as just a good pro wrestler. And I think that's probably all he's ever wanted to do. And I don't think necessarily wins or losses mean that much to him. And I don't think he really, when he was in WWE, it would have bothered him that he was a guy that was losing all of the time, and the losing streak and all that kind of stuff. I think the thing that really would have bothered him is the fact that he wasn't really doing matches. He was just doing a couple of being destroyed in 30 seconds or a minute, and that was it. And as a pro wrestling fan growing up watching pro wrestling, all you really want to do is just to have matches and have good matches, tell stories. That's what he's allowed to do in Impact Wrestling. So I think it's great to see that. As far as Black Taurus, it's funny, isn't it, with the mask and all that kind of stuff and the Decay. For me, they can call themselves the Decay, and I know it's basically 2/3 of it because it's Rosemary and it's Crazy Steve. To me, the Decay is Crazy Steve, Rosemary, and Abyss. And coming out to the theme song of the Marilyn Manson theme song, and having the influence of Billy Corgan during that time when he was president of Impact Wrestling back in, when was that, 2016, 2017, during the whole feud with the Broken Hardys and all that kind of stuff. That was great. And whilst I appreciate them trying to bring back the Decay, for me it's just not the same. I don't know. It's just not the same for me. So I prefer the original, but look, they're trying to bring back gimmicks that people know and people remember. So that's what they're doing there. As far as a prediction for this one, I'm going to go with Brian Myers. I can obviously see a situation where they have Black Taurus just absolutely destroy him, but I think that Brian Myers in these kind of situations has been kind of getting victories, I think. So I'm going to go with Brian Myers to get the victory for this one. Let's move on, and next we have a Knockouts tag team match. We have Kimberly and Susan teaming up to go up against Taylor Wilde and Tenille Dashwood. First of all, when it comes to Taylor Wilde, now Taylor Wilde's return to Impact Wrestling has been on the cards for a while. It was meant to take place last year, or certainly an agreement. Well, actually, it's even prior to that. There was an agreement made that she was going to come in prior to the pandemic. The pandemic happens, stops everything. Of course, she's from Canada, so coming over, getting the visa and all that kind of stuff is very difficult anyway. Then the pandemic happened, that slowed everything down. The plan then at the end of last year, at the end of 2020, was that she was going to come back. And obviously, again, visa problems, quarantining stuff, all that kind of stuff. The travel between just countries that share a border is difficult enough. So that was the reason her return kept getting pushed back and back and back and back and back and all that kind of stuff. But now she's finally back at Impact Wrestling. I'm glad to see her back at Impact Wrestling. For someone that retired and left pro wrestling so early. I mean, you have to remember with Taylor Wilde, she really has, she has so much history of Impact. Was it the second or third ever Knockouts champion? I think it's third ever Knockouts champion. Beat Awesome Kong for the championship. A former Knockouts tag team champion as well. With, was it Sarita? She was a tag team champion with. She's got so much history with the company. And that was, gosh, like 10 years ago, something like that. 10 years ago. When she retired, and after 10 years away, she comes back, and this is the crazy thing, the baffling thing, is that Taylor Wilde, after 10 years away from pro wrestling, she's come back, and somehow she's better than she ever was. I mean, she really is better than she ever was, and she was pretty damn good in the first place. She really was pretty damn good in the first place. Her appearances so far have been fantastic, spectacular. It's almost like, even though she hasn't been wrestling and working that much, somehow just with age, she's kind of become more experienced, more wiser, and just her psychology is so spot on. And I've been so pleasantly, I mean, I was a fan of Taylor Wilde anyway, like I said, from the earlier days in Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling at the time. But again, it's crazy that she's somehow better than she was previously. So that's amazing. When it comes to Kimberly and Susan, obviously they're part of the old Deonna Purrazzo faction and all that kind of stuff. Susan, I mean, you have to give credit to Su Yung. I mean, she's really turning into the female Mick Foley in the sense of having all of these characters, whether it's Susie, Susan, Su Yung. You just wonder what's next, don't you? I mean, she's been doing Susan since just after Bound for Glory last year, hasn't she? So I don't know if this one's maybe a little bit played out now, and maybe it might be a case of around Slammiversary time she either she changes back to Su Yung, or she finds a different persona or something like that. I'm not really sure where the end game is in that one. I think surely the end game when it comes to Susan is that she turns back into another character, whether that is Susie, whether that is Su Yung, I don't know. I mean, Susie was kind of connected to Kylie Ray, really, so I don't necessarily know how that would work. We'll have to wait and see. As far as a winner in this one, I see Taylor Wilde and Tenille Dashwood winning this. I know Tenille Dashwood might not be the easiest tag team partner for Taylor Wilde, but I think what is exciting here, and we're going to talk about this when it comes to the Knockouts Tag Team Championship match later, is that Impact Wrestling, ever since bringing back the Knockouts Tag Team Championship, there are legitimate tag teams forming in this division, which is so important. If you look at WWE, it's the opposite of what happens in WWE. WWE, they just throw together these singles people and suddenly they're tag teams and with no chemistry or no team names or anything like that, but we're starting to see tag teams being formed on the knockout side of things in Impact Wrestling. Now, it shouldn't be much of a surprise, considering that Impact Wrestling's booking of the Knockouts division is always very, very good. I mean, it's a cornerstone, it's a pillar of their programming. So the fact that we're getting Taylor Wilde, Tenille Dashwood as a tag team, we've got Kimberly, Susan as a tag team. We've got obviously the Knockouts tag team champions in Jordynne Grace, Rachel Ellering. We've got Fire and Flava. I mean, we've got all of these tag teams in Impact Wrestling on the knockout side of thing, which is great to see. So again, for a prediction in this one, I'm going to go with Taylor Wilde and Tenille Dashwood to win this one, but this should be quite a fun match. Now, moving on next, we have W. Morrissey versus Willie Mack. Now, W. Morrissey, obviously formerly known as Big Cass, has been just dominant since making his debut at Impact Rebellion last month, and I'm really glad to see, obviously, the progress that he's made outside of the ring and outside of pro wrestling. It's been a really difficult 2 or 3 years for this guy, and you have to look at I think of a Joe Rogan quote, right? And I know maybe Joe Rogan, some people might find him a bit polarizing. Obviously, he's very popular with his podcast, but like he said, we all love to see a success story. But if anything, what's better than a success story is someone that has it all, completely ruins it, or completely falls from grace, or makes a lot of mistakes and all that kind of stuff, and despite that they manage to come back and do it again and even better. And that's what I hope for when it comes to W. Morrissey. I really do. And I mean, I've mentioned it before when I spoke about W. Morrissey here on the channel. This is a guy that obviously he's incredibly talented. There's no doubt about that. He's incredibly talented. He's got a ton of charisma, and physically he's got all of the attributes just to be a massive star in the world of pro wrestling. WWE knew that. WWE knew that. The evidence of how much they thought of him is that when Daniel Bryan returned after his retirement 2018, the first feud he has after WrestleMania, after doing the match against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, teaming up with Shane McMahon, all that kind of stuff, the first feud he has is against W. Morrissey, is against Big Cass, because WWE recognized there is this guy on the roster that can make us money. He can make you money. He is money. Obviously, the personal issues and demons got the best of him, and then once he got released from WWE, it just got worse and worse and worse. It's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that was the case, and some of the things that have happened to him over the course of the last few years have been very sad and very distressing, but it looks like it would appear that finally he's managed to put that all behind him. I know obviously he's sought treatment for his addictions and looks like he's overcome them. Physically, he looks to be in absolutely phenomenal shape, arguably the best shape of his career, which is encouraging as well. And look, he's rebuilding himself. He's rebuilding his own brand, his reputation, and I think he's done a great job so far. And as I mentioned before in my other videos I've done when I've spoken about W. Morrissey, this is a guy that if he does have his head on straight, if he does have all of these issues put behind him and he's got his working boots on and he's focused and he's driven, he can do really, really big things. He's a big guy, but he can do really big things in Impact Wrestling. This is a guy that can be a world champion. And as far as we're aware, the reports have stated that he signed a deal with Impact Wrestling. He's going to be with Impact Wrestling for the foreseeable future. What the foreseeable future means, I don't know, whether that's to the end of the year, 18 months, 2 years, we don't know. But Impact Wrestling doesn't just give out contracts to anyone. They're actually quite particular when it comes to their contracts. A lot of people have per appearance deals or no deals at all. So the fact that Impact were desperate to sign this guy to a contract, that he's on television for the foreseeable future, indicates to me that they realize the talent that they have, and also that they have big plans for W. Morrissey going forward. So with that being said, given that the majority of this feud has just seen W. Morrissey just beating the hell out of Willie Mack, I would suspect that W. Morrissey gets the victory here, because why would you go in any other direction? Why would you have W. Morrissey just fresh on Impact Wrestling television? Why would you have him lose one of his first matches on a big event? I know he competed at Impact Rebellion, but why would you have him lose this match? You just wouldn't. It doesn't make any sense for him to lose this match. So I think W. Morrissey gets the victory here. And to be honest, whilst it could be a competitive match, I don't know if necessarily that would be the best booking. I think maybe the best booking here would just be have W. Morrissey just destroy Willie Mack in like 90 seconds. You could argue, what does that do for Willie Mack? I know Willie Mack's contract is coming up this year. I don't know when, but it is coming up this year, or at least it was, and I don't know if a new deal has been signed. If it has, you can let me know in the comment section below. But if that is the case, then what do you do when you're leaving the territory? You put over the new talent and you do the favors. So maybe that could be the case here with W. Morrissey and Willie Mack. So I'm going to pick W. Morrissey to win this one. We spoke about the Knockouts Tag Team Championships earlier. Obviously, the Knockouts Tag Team titles are on the line. You've got Jordynne Grace and Rachel Ellering defending against the former champions, Fire and Flava. Now, obviously, Jordynne Grace recently just re-signed with Impact Wrestling. Her contract was set to expire this year, and she has re-signed with the company. We did a video talking about that in depth, so be sure to check that out on the channel. Again, massive signing. Massive signing for Impact Wrestling, given that it's not always easy for them to retain their talent once their contracts come up. You have WWE and you have AEW start sniffing around them. The fact that they were able to keep Jordynne Grace is a big deal, and it is a massive signing for them. So I think that's a credit to Impact Wrestling. I'm a big fan of Jordynne Grace's work. I think any company would have wanted her. I think WWE would have wanted her for their NXT Women's Division. I think AEW certainly would have wanted her for their AEW Women's Division as well. But it shows the commitment, as I mentioned before, to Impact Wrestling, to their Knockouts division, and also to the Knockouts Tag Team division. I mentioned earlier on in the video about the different tag teams that are being formed by Impact Wrestling going forward. And you've got two other tag teams in here. You've got Fire and Flava, who I'm a big fan of their work in ring. I think that And people might find this slightly controversial, I guess, but I feel like their promos need a bit more work. And people will go, whoa, 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 isn't that the best thing about them, is their promos? When they won the Knockouts Tag Team Championships at Hard to Kill, I was glad to see that because I felt they were the best tag team, and I felt they were the right tag team to do that. Then they had the whole, was it Fire and Flavor Fest and all that kind of stuff, and some of those segments that they had with Havok and Nevaeh, and I just was watching them going, man, this feels like a bit of a miss. It feels like a bit of a miss. And again, that's not their fault or anything like that. I just felt like, maybe they need to improve on that. I don't know. I think they are a great tag team. I think they're great in the ring, and I'm sure the match will be just as strong as it was at Impact Rebellion. Not massive on the whole rematch thing, but Impact do kind of have a bit of a rematch culture on their programming. They do a lot of rematches, unfortunately. I don't see a scenario whereby... You know what? This is a tough one to predict. I was just about to say, and I just stopped myself there. I was going to say I don't see why Jordynne Grace and Rachel Ellering would drop the championship so quickly after they won them. But we did get that report, didn't we? We did get that report that said there was a championship or a title change planned for the latest set of Impact Wrestling tapings. Now, they emphasized in this report that it was planned. It doesn't necessarily mean that it happened. And a lot of people said, myself included, that if there was going to be a title change planned, it would probably be for the Knockouts Tag Team Championship. So... maybe Fire and Flavor do get this one, actually. Trying to put pieces together. Let's be a bit logical here. Let's be a bit rational here. So, given that report, and again, it was Fightful that reported this, and they do have reasonably good ties with Impact Wrestling. I'm going to say that we see a title change here. I'm going to say we see that Fire and Flavor become 2 times Knockouts Tag Team Champions here, and I'm basing it off that report. And if I'm wrong, then that's not my fault. No, obviously it's my prediction, it's my fault. And I suppose what we do have to think about here is we don't know the situation with Rachel Ellering and her contract with Impact Wrestling. Well, we know that Jordynne Grace is re-signed with the company, and she's going to be around for a while. Rachel Ellering, we don't know if she's on a per appearance deal. We don't know if she's actually signed long-term for the foreseeable future or anything like that. So maybe it's a case of Rachel Ellering came in, worked a couple of tapings, they put the title on her, and now she's gone. Who knows? So I'm going to go with Fire and Flavor to get the victory in this one. Next up, we have the X Division Championship. We have Josh Alexander defending against El Phantasmo. Now, this one could steal the show, obviously, because I'm a big fan of both talents involved here. And I mentioned about the Impact Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling working relationship being incredibly strong, and it just goes to show. The only difference is that obviously whilst we have New Japan Pro Wrestlers FinJuice being the Impact World Tag Team Champions, I don't think we're going to see El Phantasmo become the X Division Champion here. Of course, Josh Alexander just won the X Division Championship at Impact Rebellion, so I don't think he's going to have a short title reign. I think obviously Impact has very big plans for this man, and obviously I did a video the other day talking about which stars on the Impact Wrestling roster could be the one to defeat Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship, and one of those names that I spoke about was Josh Alexander. And I think that's because this is a guy that, yes, his contract does expire at the end of the year, but he's spoken about maybe a desire to stay with Impact Wrestling. He's obviously getting a big singles push right now that Ethan Page has left and the North is split up. I was concerned with how the North split up last year because I felt that Ethan Page should have put Josh Alexander over on the way out. I felt that was the right thing to do because that set Josh Alexander up as a top single star in the territory. Ethan Page reportedly didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep the North pure so they could reunite in the future. The irony being that now he's in AEW and he's formed a new tag team. Wouldn't you know it? It just feels really, really strange, isn't it? Really odd. Nevertheless, Josh Alexander has had great success. He's had a great success since he broke up into a single star in Impact Wrestling, did a couple of tag team matches with the likes of James Storm, Mack, Cardona, that kind of stuff. But now he's the X Division champion, and I think he's a fantastic pick to be the X Division champion because he's not your prototypical X Division star. Previously, and I'd criticized this in the past, previously, Impact, the X Division had kind of lost its identity. Certainly it had by the end of 2020, and I felt that it needed to go back to what it was in its heyday, in its glory years. And what I felt was that you needed to remember that Impact Wrestling's X Division wasn't a cruiserweight division. It wasn't about weight limits, it was about no limits. That was the cliche, but it was true. And the X Division was about a hybrid of styles, not about a high-flying styles, it was about a hybrid of styles. And some of the best X Division champions weren't necessarily high flyers. Doug Williams, great X Division champion because he had a different style. And that's why I was a big fan to see Josh Alexander become the X Division champion, because I think it should be treated as more of a platform to the main event scene. Obviously, you've got the option C, and it has kind of been a platform to a World Championship opportunity in the future. Maybe it will be with Josh Alexander going forward. So I like the clash of styles here. I like the clash of styles between El Phantasmo, who is a high flyer. I wasn't massively keen on the spot on Impact where he pretty much walks around the entire ring. It's a little bit suspension of disbelief, I know, but I know some people liked it, so what are you going to do? As far as this one, again, I think this one could steal the show, I really do, but I'm going to go with Josh Alexander to get the victory here and retain the X Division Championship. So let's move on. We have the Knockouts Championship. We have Deonna Purrazzo defending the Knockouts Championship against Havok. Now, previously, obviously, Havok had a match on Impact Wrestling to qualify for this, and I didn't think that Havok was going to win. I thought Rosemary would win this one, but looking back on it, I guess obviously Nevaeh left the company and she put over Havok on the way out, which again I think is the right way to do it, and it gave Havok some momentum, and it's certainly an interesting and different opponent for Deonna Purrazzo to face, because she's faced a plethora of opponents now in Impact Wrestling, whether it is Jordynne Grace, whether it is or it's going to be Kylie Rae, whether it was Su Yung, or the list goes on and on. She's faced similar kind of people, whether it's Jordynne Grace or Jazz. Havok provides a different kind of opponent for Deonna Purrazzo to face. Obviously a bigger opponent, a stronger opponent, and it means that Deonna Purrazzo has to work a different kind of match, so it's a different presentation of a Deonna Purrazzo match than we're used to. In my opinion right now, not only is Deonna Purrazzo the best women's wrestler in Impact Wrestling by far, she is right up there in the conversation at the moment for being one of the best women's wrestlers in the world, which I know is a massive statement, but if you've seen any of her work since going to Impact Wrestling, you will know that this female is just on fire right now. She's absolutely on fire, and it does make you wonder, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, how on earth did WWE let someone like Deonna Purrazzo slip through their fingers? How on earth did they let someone like Deonna Purrazzo go, where ever since she's come to Impact Wrestling, pretty much apart from dropping the championship at Bound for Glory last year, but winning it back pretty soon afterwards, Deonna Purrazzo has been the Knockouts champion pretty much the entirety of the time she's been in Impact Wrestling, and it's just completely, continuously nailed it time after time after time, and you will struggle to find a female competitor right now who is on as much of a roll as Deonna Purrazzo. And Impact Wrestling know that. Impact Wrestling know that that is just spot on. Just absolutely spot on, dead on, absolutely right. So I obviously, I think she's going to retain it, obviously. And on top of that, I think she's going to have a fantastic match, despite, again, a complete clash of styles and a completely different match to what we're necessarily used to. I mean, Deonna Purrazzo, like I said, she is just Iron Man matches, singles matches, main events, openers, everything. She has absolutely nailed it so far. She really has. So interested to see the presentation for this one, I really am. But I think, obviously, Deonna Purrazzo retains. I don't think she's going to drop the championship anytime soon. The earliest would be Slammiversary. And even then, I would say, keep it on her, because who right now is worthy of taking that title off her? I don't see anyone, and Impact has a really strong Knockouts division. Maybe we wait till Slammiversary until we get in maybe a Chelsea Green, or maybe one of the Iconics, or maybe Mickie James. That's when you start saying, okay, they're possibly the next name to take off the Knockouts championship from Deonna Purrazzo. So let's go into the co-main events for the show. The first is a six-man tag team match. You have Kenny Omega teaming up with Doc Gallows and Karl Anderson to face Eddie Edwards and the Impact World Tag Team Champions New Japan Pro Wrestling's FinJuice. What an inter-promotional match this is. You've got competitors and talents in this match from Impact Wrestling, AEW, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. If you'd have said this to someone last year, that you would have an Impact Wrestling match presentation that would involve talents from Impact, from AEW, from New Japan, people would have said you're crazy. And it just goes to show that forbidden door, it's like a saloon door at this point. It just flaps open and closed like that. It's amazing. Obviously, this is an interesting one. And the reason I say it's an interesting one, because when it comes to Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling, I think we know, and I've said this before, that Kenny Omega isn't going to be around in Impact Wrestling forever. Certainly isn't going to be around forever because he's obviously got limited appearances. He's an AEW contracted talent. This is part of the AEW Impact working relationship for now, but eventually he's going to drop the Impact World Championship and carry on in AEW. That's just what's going to happen. If it was me on this show, I would have Kenny Omega defend the Impact World Championship against someone he's never faced before. And the reason I would have him do that is because what makes championship reigns great is the defenses that they have. Continuous defenses against different talents. And then at the end of it, you can line them up. You can say, oh, it was an amazing championship reign of 6 months, whatever. And he faced it off against this guy. He retained against this guy. He had matches against this guy. And that's when you really look at it and say, oh, that's a great title reign. That's a great title reign. CM Punk's title reign for WWE was fantastic because he had all of these different matches against all of these different talents with Chris Jericho, Daniel Bryan, Kane, John Cena, Ryback, The Rock, all that kind of stuff. You go, that's a really great title reign. A really Dolph Ziggler. It's a great title reign. And that's what I would want to see for Kenny Omega. And obviously him holding the Impact World Championship is historic because it's an AEW talent. It's his first ever time that he's held the title in the company, all that kind of stuff. But what would make it really historic is all the title defenses. And I don't want to get to a point where we only see Kenny Omega defend the Impact World Championship a couple of times before he drops it. Ideally, I would want to see him defending it every month. The storyline heading into the Impact Rebellion match when it was Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega, the big storyline heading into it, right, was that the winner was going to keep up the commitments of the champion for either company. And I obviously he is keeping up the commitments because he's competing on this card, but I don't know. I would just rather see him defend it on every event, but maybe that keeps it special. I don't know. As far as a winner in this one, it's without any shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, that Omega and the Good Brothers win. I think Omega probably gets the victory by pinning Eddie Edwards. Eddie Edwards is in this match, obviously to represent Impact along with the Good Brothers, but I think he's also in this match to take the pinfall. I think given the fact that Gallows and Anderson will be on the winning team, they can say that this allows them to get another opportunity at the Impact Tag Team Championships, which I think they eventually win, and then they can take them back to AEW television or flaunt them on AEW television, all that kind of stuff, even though we would have crowned Impact Tag Team Championship #1 contenders in the first match of the show. Eventually they're getting the titles back. They're two of the highest paid guys on the roster, two of the biggest stars on the roster. They're obviously the biggest tag team on the roster. They're going to get the Impact World Tag Team Championships back at some point. So I think the outcome of this match is relatively straightforward. I think Kenny Omega and his team gets a victory after Kenny Omega pins Eddie Edwards. And then finally, you have the main event. You have the 6-way #1 contenders match. The winner of this match will become the #1 contender for the Impact World Championship. Now, I broke this down in a bit of greater detail in a video that I did yesterday, so be sure to check that out on the channel. But you've got Sami Callihan, Chris Bay, Chris Sabin, Trey, Miguel, Moose, and Mack Cardona. The winner will become the #1 contender for the Unified Impact World Championship, of course, held by AEW's Kenny Omega. Now, I think the most likely outcome here, as I mentioned yesterday, is a Moose victory. I think Moose gets the victory because his contract does expire next month in June. We know that his contract expires next month. He said it himself. He said as well on Twitter that his aim is to win the Unified Impact World Championship before his contract expires next month. My opinion really hasn't changed that much on where do I think what Moose is going to do. I do think he leaves at the end of his contract. I think there are companies like WWE and AEW that are stepping around him. I think the improvement that he has demonstrated over the course of the past 12 months has been drastic. Obviously, physically, he's in the best shape of his life. Promos have improved, and certainly in the ring, that has improved as well. There are a ton of guys in this match that I would love to see Kenny Omega face off against. Kenny Omega versus Chris Bay, awesome match. Kenny Omega versus Trey Miguel, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Matt Cardona compete for an Impact World Championship, compete in that main event scene for a World Championship. But I think the only outcome here is that Moose wins. And I think then that leads to an Impact World Championship match between Moose and Kenny Omega at Against All Odds next month in June. I think that possibly then becomes a championship versus career match, and that's how they write Moose off of television, because Kenny Omega retains, moves on to Slammiversary, then he faces whoever he's going to face. So while I expect this one to be an absolute classic and a real barn burner of a match, I think the outcome is relatively straightforward in that I think Moose wins, and I then think Moose challenges Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship. What could happen, though, and let's not rule this out, is that Moose does win, and I'm saying that I think it's likely to happen next month. His match against Kenny Omega will happen in June. because that's when his contract expires. Possibly we could see a scenario where maybe Moose agrees to maybe a slight extension to the contract, or maybe we see a situation where Moose wins this match, and the winner of this match then moves on to Slammiversary, and then maybe it is Moose versus Kenny Omega at Slammiversary, and then maybe, just maybe, Moose wins the Unified Impact World Championship and then decides to stay with Impact Wrestling. Maybe that's the way to keep him on the roster. That certainly is interesting, although, again, I'm just not necessarily sure I see that happening. So I'm going to go with Moose winning this one and becoming the #1 contender, but I still don't think he's going to be around in Impact Wrestling for much longer. But that, guys, that's my Impact Wrestling Under Siege predictions. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. It really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or having come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.